Let's get back to this part of the world because the United Arab Emirates plans to invest $30 billion in hydrogen projects in South Korea. The investments were announced during a state visit by President Yoon Suk-yeol. That is the first time that the South Korean leader visits since the two established relations all the way back 4 decades ago. Bloomberg's Simone Foxman has more on this. So Simone, do we have any idea what shape these investments could take?
Well, I think the overall theme here is trying to reforge the relationship, an already strong relationship between South Korea and the UAE, to account for a new future where climate change is very important. And so these investments, we understand, at least in the hydrogen space, going to come around production, transmission, and storage. And in an editorial, President Yoon expressed the depth, essentially, of these relationships between the UAE and South Korea, as well as other Gulf countries. He said that 30% roughly of the construction contracts that Korean companies get from abroad are from the Middle East region, and that more than 50% of the country's oil at this point comes from the Gulf specifically. There were also some mentions, however, of nuclear power plants, of solar energy. Those things could be a target for investments between these two countries as well. But this is very important. We're seeing the UAE going to host COP28 later this year as it looks to expand its investment ties with countries that it hasn't always had the most major business in. So here we see the diplomatic angle, we see the investment angle coming together with these announcements over the weekend.
Mm-hmm. And then across the Gulf in Iran, the execution of a former government official is having a ripple effect in the UK. What's happening there?
Yeah, former Deputy Defense Minister in Iran, Ali Reza Akbari, the state Mizan announcing his execution on Saturday, and this likely to add to animosity between the UK and Iran, because we saw a bunch of major rejections, condemnations of this coming from the likes of Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister in the UK, as well as James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, and the accusation here was that Akbari was a member of MI6 and working with UK intelligence. The Telegraph also adding to this idea of animosity between these two countries, reporting that the UK is reconsidering its support for a return to the 2015 nuclear deal. That is the deal that allowed Iranian oil to be sold widely on the open markets. Mostly this deal not being considered very optimistic prospects, but if the UK reconsiders its support, pulls its support, I mean, that pretty much could be a nail in the coffin for ever getting back to reviving that deal.
Absolutely. And then to markets, we've got new inflation data out from the region, from Saudi Arabia, 3.3%. That's the highest in quite some time.
Yeah, and we also just in the last hour or so saw new inflation data coming in from Qatar as well, 5.9%. That pretty much on par with September, and that's the highest in a very long time, leading the Gulf essentially in terms of the strongest inflation numbers. We're also looking at new inflation data coming out of Israel, 5.8% year-on-year price growth in the month of December, and that's particularly notable because Israel has much more control over its monetary policy and has embarked on a very aggressive program of rate hikes, but we're not seeing the number come down yet. The real test of this, according to Bank of Israel Governor Amir Yaron, likely to come in March. He said inflation is going to remain high through February, and then we're going to start to see it falling. He told that to us earlier this month in early January. We're also going to get some GDP data out from Israel today. Watch that, because Bank Hapoalim saying we're not likely to see any growth in the fourth quarter. We'll see what impact the rate hikes are having on that underlying growth. Youssef.
Yeah, the governor is a good friend, and I wish more central bankers would take the initiative to address the public, beyond just the United States and Europe. So kudos to him. Simone, thank you for that. Simone Foxman there in Doha.